14 years into my pilgrimage and devotion to covering the aesthetics, the higher aesthetics of art and music with my elders and peers in music. As a non-musician, the most important thing is the vibe. Without the vibe, you can't raise the collective frequencies of the audience and raise the collective consciousness and stumble out in a contemplative fashion after a long night of sweating and blues music. And at the end of the day, if there's no vibe, then the musicians are essentially wanking it on the bandstand to themselves. And I get a chance today to speak to somebody who not only is an incredibly progressive, ambitious musician, but also somebody who surrounded himself with many dear friends of mine back in the day, and took his own easel to the greatest clubs in the world. I could only imagine, being born in 1978, what it must have been like to be in the cultural milieu of New York at that time. And my guests came and painted, and these turned into album covers of iconic records. And then eventually went out to Los Angeles and collaborated musically with other cats like Bobby Bradford and John Carter and dear friend Alex Klein. So he's done it all, and most importantly, raised the universal vibration in this planet. Vinny Golia, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Oh, thank you. That's a rather impressive introduction.
I thought you would dig it. I mean, it's just like two soul brothers long ago finally connected. You know, there's a few things I wanted to get off the table right away. Did you ever hang with Moondog?
You know, he worked. Well, he didn't work. He used to hang out near the Museum of Modern Art, and I had a day gig there. So on lunchtime, on occasion, I would go and bust his chops a little bit because, he would just stand there, and I was kind of curious about him. He'd just stand there dressed like a Viking, and I'd say like, "So, what's this about?" And he'd talk to me, but like obviously he was kind of perturbed that this cat would come around every day and bust his chops. I didn't know that he was a composer until later. I happened to be in a record store. I spent a lot of time in record stores before I started to play, and like I think we all did. And there it was, bam, Moondog. I was like, holy crap, this is that cat.
So he was.
So
The point is that he was like, yeah, he was a very humble person. He never boasted about his composing job.
He didn't say crap, and his stuff was good. I mean, it's not like it was like this kind of weirdo guy. I mean, it was really well constructed, and I thought it was good. So okay, so I go back to the corner after I see the record, and he's moved to a new corner, and I couldn't find him. So I wouldn't say I hung out with him, but I certainly was a pest.
I mean, from your perspective, I mean, being my dad's age, I mean, I'm 47. I wanted to know why purveyors of music, people, even the bean counters or the A&R guys, why was his stuff commercially available? I mean, that stuff, you can't, the greatest music going on in Tucson where I live, you can't commodify it. But back in the 50s, you could. And I'm curious, was it because we were more of an auditory learning society? Were we just hipper at that time? Was it just the historical parameters of what we were going through? I remember Phil Wood saying that World War II ended and there was so much joy that the language of music that came out of that was jazz or bebop. And I just wonder, why was it commercial? Not that he made millions of dollars, but why?
I have an idea, but it's just my own idea that I can
It's your
throw out
interview,
to you.
baby. Yeah.
But it's just my idea. During that period of time, like so we're talking Moondog, we're talking like 60s, and or actually we're talking late 60s. But before the late 60s, around the late 50s, when I was a kid, there were a lot of TV shows and people interested in something different or something that would television was actually an educational tool back then. You could see I mean, that's my introduction to like Charles Lloyd, Roland Kirk, and Rufus Hawley. There was
Love
a
it.
show about tenor saxophone players, just a television show. Each person got 15 minutes or so, and it was a fantastic show. And then another show was like Leonard Bernstein was on in the afternoon and stuff. I don't think the situation was that it was commercial. I think that people really wanted to have
Learn.
an
Yeah.
overview of the arts. I mean, you could buy classical music in an AMP. For people who don't know what an AMP is, an AMP is a like Walmart was what is now. You know, it was like, but just groceries and
Sure.
stuff. You know, yeah, AMP, and then there was after that was ShopRite. Those were the big supermarkets for food. So but you could buy like like once a week there'd be a new installment. And my mom, for example, like, you know, she bought these things because she wanted music in the house, and this was like not like, you know, these were pretty good versions of, like, you know, the classics and stuff like that. And she'd go around the house in the morning when she was cleaning the house. She'd sing along with the records and stuff like that. I mean, this was, you know, I'm talking blue collar people who
Absolutely.
were kind of, you know, like kind of into the, not totally into the arts, but like at least they were inquisitive. You know, I find that amazingly lacking now, because now we go for the lowest common denominator. You know, it's like, okay, does it groove? You know, groove in the sense of like, here's the, you know, boom, 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 boom. You know, okay, you know, okay, can you
Right.
move your ass to it? You know, okay, great. You know, okay, yeah, but let's put that out. That's good. You know, it's more of the same. It's not going to rock any boats. You know. So that's what I think. You know, I
I
think
mean, Vinny, I
people
mean,
were looking.
I just wanted to ask you about, because what you're really talking about, I think, is, I mean, even I remember Ramsey Lewis told me, I mean, it was jazz music, whatever that means, was music for blue collar people. Art Blakey said his job was to wash away the dust of everyday life for the cats that came in after a hard day of work. And then, like you said, obviously there's something to be said for the earliest, acoustic electric fusion music, but things became very precious. And so how has the significance of spiritual instrumental music changed in our culture?
Well, I mean, you know, I'm no expert,
You were
but
there, man.
well, I mean, you know, like growing up as first in the Bronx and then in New Jersey, uh, um, um, you know, like that's what you heard on the radio was pretty much jazz, and what my dad listened to were elements of jazz and big band music and talk radio. I mean, he didn't listen to rock and roll, which was just coming up, you know, but all
Sure.
that R&B stuff was there. It was on the radio. You could hear it, you know, and then as it morphed, you know, like as the schism became like, you know, like going country, Western kind of thing for white people and going to the R&B thing for more of the black, you know, black audiences. There was definitely a schism, and you got to remember the country is not exactly as open-minded, you know. So
No.
as we think it was back then, you know, and so, you know, cats listen to white radio, other cats listen to black radio. I mean, the thing for us, I remember like, you know, hanging out with I always hung out with cats that were older. So this one guy, Teddy, had a car, and he would get some beer and get some, you know, maybe a joint and stuff.
Sure.
And we listened to Symphony Sid and people like that on the radio Sunday night.
Absolutely.
And then I'd start listening to the gospel stations at Sunday night, you know. And my parents weren't exactly happy about like my association with Black Cats, or my association with that music. You know, they didn't like it, and they didn't like certain things because they had associations that I knew nothing about. You know, like they didn't like Bob Dylan because Bob Dylan reminded them of Woody Guthrie, who was like a, you know, like a kind of a union breaker guy, and you know, well, no, he was a union guy, you know,
Union guy, right,
and
right.
yeah, and there were these unions that actually kind of had to fight for their rights with, against union
Absolutely.
breakers and stuff like that. So that brought back these memories of the Depression that they didn't want to hear about. And so they wanted everything to be light and kind of bubbly. And then you got guys, and you got cats like Pat Boone and all that kind of stuff. Meanwhile, like, out here in the West Coast, cats are doing the cool jazz thing, which we knew nothing about. We get little drifts of that stuff. But then there was this hard bop stuff that would come on the radio and it was like, whoa, what is this? This is
Yeah,
kind of,
because your dad was
you
like
know?
your dad was like like in the bag of like the Four Brothers, Woody Herman, the big band stuff.
Well, my mom and dad saw all those groups. So,
But he
matter of
wasn't. I mean,
fact,
what I'm saying is that he was like the bebop would call. I remember Harold Jones, who was Tony Bennett's drummer, Count Basie's drummer. I mean, when Bird died, and he was with Joe Hunt and those cats in Indiana, and they all wore sunglasses at night. And when Bird
yeah, yeah.
died, I mean, those cats started crying. And Harold was too young to really know what was going on. Do you remember the first time or one of the earliest experiences you heard that bebop burning Dizzy or Navarro or Bird bebop?
Well, on Sunday nights, like I said, we were listening, and a lot of this stuff was like, a lot of stuff was Charlie Parker and Dizzy, but like, I have to be honest, like I didn't get into that stuff immediately. I was more like a rock guy. I was into Hendrix, and
Okay.
I was
Okay.
really into blues bands. I mean, for me, it's very weird. I was into blues bands. Indian music was big, just coming in, and I was eating it up like crazy. We would go see Ravi Shankar and Ali Akbar Khan
Oh,
and
this is fantastic.
all that stuff. But we would also go to the Fillmore East, and the Fillmore East would have all these bands, not only from the East Coast, but also from the West Coast. So we saw Zappa, and we saw, you name it. We saw it. Love and all those groups. I particularly
Hmm.
like Love. That was a great band. And then of course, we saw Hendrix. Matter of fact, I was in the audience when they did the Band of Gypsies record. I was at that concert, and that was an amazingly good concert. But what they never talk about is like the young. I think I can't remember what it's called, the Youth Choir of Harlem or something, something like that.
Voices of East Harlem or something.
Something like that. They
Yeah,
opened the concert for Hendrix.
burning band.
Yeah, they came running down through the aisles singing
Oh
and
my
came
God,
up
are you
on
kidding
stage.
me?
Yeah, yeah, and that was the opener for Hendrix for that band, the Gypsies thing, and we stayed both sets, and it was just killer. I have to say I preferred Mitch Mitchell over Buddy Guy, but not
Buddy
Buddy Guy,
Miles, yeah.
what's his
Buddy,
name?
Mi- Buddy Miles.
Buddy Miles.
Yeah,
Sorry. And because I like that band. I saw that
I
band a
did.
lot,
Yeah.
the original band, and that's the band I really like. But this band, Hendrix was on fire. He had reached another place. And then
Well,
years
no.
later,
mm,
hmm? Oh, I was gonna
No, I
say
mean, this is
years
just so,
later.
it's so, it's, I mean, everything. I mean, Scepter Records had an offshoot. I mean, the amount of gospel records that were put out in Jersey. Jersey was a bastion of gospel music because you were in between New York and Philly. I mean, it
Well,
was really a
my
pretty,
friends were part of the Young Rascals. So,
Felix,
so
Felix.
Eddie, a little Eddie Brigatti, and actually his brother Dave sang a lot of the backup stuff,
Holy shit.
and so we would go hang out with them. Matter of fact, we'd take a trip to New York. We'd go see the Maharishi. What was that guy's name?
Swami Satchidananda.
Swami. Swami Swami. That's him. Yeah, we used to go see him because those guys were rolling. Once
Felix
they,
was a devotee, man. I've interviewed him
yeah,
a couple times. Yeah.
yeah.
You
So we
cannot
would go,
believe it.
go there and hang out and listen to the lecture and do hatha and that kind of stuff, and hang out sometimes in Garfield, New Jersey, with all those cats. I mean, Dave was with Peppermint Twist was the big hit. I forgot
Yeah, I remember.
Joey
Yeah,
D,
yeah.
Joey
Hong
D and the
Kong.
Star. Yeah, Joey D and the Starlighters. You know, so all that stuff the Shirelles used to sing outside a pool hall in Passaic when I was a kid. You know, we would play pool in there. We'd go to Passaic. That was a big thing. The bus
I
ride,
cannot believe you lived the
15
greatest
cents.
life in the world. I mean, honestly, the Capitol Theater was a smut house by day, and at night it was Merle Saunders and Jerry Garcia for 6 hours. I mean, it was nuts. John Shear, I've interviewed him a couple of times. I mean, I wanted to just ask you about, I'm going to go on a limb here. There's a couple of places I wanted to talk to you about. Um, because at one point we just lost Jesse Colin Young, obviously, rest in peace from the Young
Yeah.
Bucks. And at one time down in Alphabet City, it was Larry Coryell, Rockalam Bob Moses, Mike Knock, Lowell Levenger, Jesse Colin Young, and I'm trying to figure out with Golia, did you wind up on the lower west side of New York, or in Alphabet City, or both?
No, I first when I first lived in New York, I was with a woman from who played flute, Nancy Janison, and we lived in Brooklyn Heights. And then when we split up, I stayed for I think about a month with Dave Liebman in in uh, in on 19th Street, and that
Yep.
was a real active loft scene there. And then I sublet Bob Moses' loft to paint on the Lower East Side, Bleecker and Bowery. So, and after
Holy
Bleecker
cow,
and
you were
Bowery,
there.
I started traveling. So at Bleecker and Bowery, I was walking distance from Slugs. So Slugs became my home. Like I would go to work in the daytime and draw pictures of musicians in the nighttime. And uh, I met tons of musicians, and that's what got me into playing. I started using my paintings as music notation and all kinds of things like that, and doing live shows with musicians, painting while they played, and then I did an album cover for Chick Corea, and with that money, I bought a soprano saxophone.
I wanted to read you this quote from Lenny White, my interview with him. He said, Liebman used to have a loft on 19th Street in Manhattan. In the building, Chick lived on the middle floor. Dave Holland lived on the bottom floor. We would go there and have jam sessions at Dave's loft all the time. Michael and Randy Brecker, Cables, Steve Grossman. We would have jam sessions, and they would all take mescaline and play, or smoke weed and play. I didn't take part in it, but I was around it all the time. There's some great creative music that came from that. I experienced from that perspective, and all the employers that I had, they were doing whatever they were doing. Um, I mean, like I talked about in the intro, it's to me. Can you just talk about the healing component that you received at that time? I mean, I don't think that there was more. Obviously, I mean, Train passed in '67, but spiritually and psychically, the opportunity for you to hear at the time relatively young cats, but the highest level of creative art musically, how that influenced your artwork and the healing on you psychically.
Well, I had been introduced to different um, things through hatha yoga, and then through the autobiography of a yogi, I got into eventually got into self-realization,
Hmm.
fellowship, and I always felt that that was my connection. Uh, I didn't experiment. I took a painting down to Grand Central Station, not a big one, but a small one, and I stood next to it in Grand Central, and a few people walked by and maybe looked and stuff like that. I did it during the highest point of rush hour. I wanted to see which had more impact.
Hmm.
And so then about a couple of days later, I went there with my saxophone, and I couldn't play. You got to understand that I started at 25 and I had no training. I was just around really good musicians, you know.
Sure.
So I took the saxophone out and I opened the case and I just did what I did, which was kind of skronk and whatever I could do. And people would stop and listen and actually made a couple of bucks. And I couldn't play at all. So to me, that, that showed me that sound had a more impact on
Wow.
people. So I started to incorporate sound as like a kind of a I don't know, like a catalyst somehow of getting what was inside me outside. And
Sure.
the spiritual thing, I was drawn, Coltrane sucked me in like amazingly, like once I heard those records, I was hooked. I had been listening to jazz on the lighter side and stuff, and one of my friends said, "If you like that, you should check this out." And I put it in my head, and then by accident, I bought a Coltrane record, and it was Coltrane, AS 26. That's just says Coltrane on the cover. It's the blue cover on
Wow.
Impulse. It's got like Tunji and all those fantastic tunes, Out of This World and all those tunes, and I just say like, oh man, this is it. And so I started pursuing it. But here's the weird thing: I had gone to all these concerts and concerts of other music, starting with folk music, going to Indian music, going to the blues guys, going to the Fillmore East. It never dawned on me that you could actually see this music played live until one of my friends said, "You like this stuff? Why don't you ever go see it?" And I said,
Wait,
I said, where can
you didn't think it was presentable in a live context,
I
or you
don't
just
know. I don't know what I was thinking. I can't really explain it. You
now I
know,
just want to be clear about the chronology though. You got hip to train before you started just squeaking and squawking at Grand Central.
a train was the reason I bought a soprano.
Okay, got it. Got it.
I
Okay, yeah.
mean, I couldn't figure out what the hell he was doing and why he
Right.
was
Nobody
doing it,
could. No, yeah.
why he sounded so different than everybody else. And the link for me was like he started talking about the spiritual aspects of the music and all that stuff, and that was like, wow, I want some of that, you know? I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
this painting thing is pretty cool, but it's not really doing it. I mean, I tried working with laser beams, all kind of holograms, all this. I tried as much as you could try back then, on a limited artist budget, I mean, back then money did go a lot longer than it does
Oh, it
now.
sure
But
did. Oh, it sure did.
but but every time I bought a laser, that was another $300, and that was a lot of money back then. So, I mean, long story short is I went to Slugs, and that was it. I saw Larry Coryell, and he was playing with Mike Mantle and a drummer named Steve Haas. But Moses sat in one night,
Oh yeah.
and that
The
was
free
just
spirits, dude. The
phenomenal.
free spirits, man.
But here's the
Yeah.
the kicker on this story is
Yeah.
I happened to look over, and by that time, I was kind of ensconced into the music. We had met. I had met Chick and Dave and Liebman and all these other cats. So
Oh.
I was listening to music like crazy. I was painting up my ass off. And I look over and I see this guy all dressed in leather. And I said, like, huh. And he's got this hat and he's sitting there. Even his saxophone that had a leather case that was handmade. It was gorgeous. I can still see it. And I walk over to him and I said, "Excuse me, are you Cato Barbieri?"
Oh.
And he tilts his hat up and he just nods and goes, "Hmm." And I said, "Are you playing tonight?" And he said, "Hmm." And I said, "Oh." I said, I really am a big fan of your music. The stuff with Jerry and your own, his own. He had his first record had come out on Flying Dutchman. It was really great. And I said, I really like your music. He said, "Thank you." Okay, it's real quiet sat there. I left him alone because it obviously he's not a talker, or maybe just didn't know English that well. I
Right,
don't know.
right, right, right.
Yeah. So they call him up, and as you know, as would happen in slugs, weird things happen. A red Ferrari pulls up, and an alto player gets out. Miles drops off this guy who's an alto player, and he's going to sit in with Larry Coryell. Okay, so Larry invites Gatto to come up and play. Okay, so this alto player is kind of like a bop guy, right? Okay.
Yeah.
And he's playing. Gatto's leaning up against the wall with the tenor in his hands, with his hat down again, that black hat he always wore, you know, and he's leaning back. And it was like at one point he took every note that this bebop guy had played and he put it into one note,
Right.
and all the notes that this guy played were in there, and he went in the middle of this guy's solo, and it was like, holy crap. And then he started playing, and I'm telling you, when he finished, like there's a Star Trek episode where there's a transporter with this guy is like
Sure.
on another planet, and there's an alien that's kind of female, but he doesn't know it, and
Yeah, yeah.
whenever he's encased in this female form, you can see all these little sparkly things, lights and stuff like that.
That was
Well,
coming off of him. Yeah.
that's what happened. You
Holy
could see,
shit.
air. You could
Yeah,
see
you
the
were
air
you
when he
were
finished.
yeah. God.
It was unbelievable. It was like bonk, and I went like, "Holy crap! You can do that with music?" I mean, Gatto was like, it was unbelievable, unbelievable. And then, of course, Farrow would play slugs almost every month and a half, and that's another level. Still another level. And Alice played there with Rashid a lot, and Slugs was like the place. Cecil would play often. Well, not that often. But he played a lot when I saw him out with the trio with Jimmy Lyons and Cyril, and sometimes Sam Rivers played, or Alan Silva maybe played. Sun Ra would play at Slugs. I went to a gig there, and I went through at least two reams of paper
Oh my
drawing
gosh.
pictures,
Oh my
pictures of.
gosh.
He started at 8:30 and he finished at 4 in the morning. It was unbelievable,
Still great to
unbelievable.
it's great to hear a landline in Golia's house still too as well right now. The phone behind you. Still having a
Oh,
landline. It's
no,
fun.
it's a
No, no,
it's myself.
I mean, how um like just going back, you said you were a little bit young for this, but I mean, because obviously the Blues Project, Richie Havens, Cafe a Go Go, you did that thing. Jimi
Oh
Hendrix,
yeah,
that's it.
Richie
But
Havens was
what
like,
about? Yeah, no, Mike Mainieri, Richie Havens gave Mike Mainieri the idea to put a wah wah bar on his vibes. But the thing is, a wah pedal. But the reality is, did you actually get to see like Wavy Gravy or the Gaslight or the passing the basket houses, the folk scene, or was that sort of a little too hippie for you?
yeah, well, Cafe Wah was a big one, and
Yeah,
all that stuff. I mean, a lot of the old blues guys had been rediscovered during that period of time. Excuse
sure.
me. I wasn't. I didn't really understand that they had been rediscovered. To me, they were all new. It was
No, I
like,
mean, it was so
you
beautiful
know,
because like, all the folk bands were going down and Mississippi John Hurt, and they were pulling these guys out of obscurity and getting them back on the
oh
track.
man, yeah. So like Lightning Hopkins and
Yeah,
all these cats would come, and it was a regular circuit. And my friends were real folkies. Matter of fact, they had a folk group. So some of my friends
yeah.
turned me on to like Richard and Mimi Ferrenia, Joan Baez,
Wait,
Jimmy
did they have a
Collins,
tub? Did they have a
Joni
wash tub?
Mitchell.
Did they have a wash tub bass in the band?
No washtub bass,
Yeah, because you
real
could. I mean, Fritz Richmond, those cats were
electric.
dragging wash.
Yeah, no, they had the real stuff. Mimi and Richard Ferrenia, they just played duo,
Right,
just
right.
And that was most of these cats just played, got up there with a guitar and just sang and talked and did the thing. I mean, the most interesting cat I think was that guy Tim Buckley. He
He
was
was
he was
out.
really cool. He played at the Fillmore. He was pretty interesting. Different, really different.
Yeah, I know
And
because
then
I
there
remember.
were the,
Yeah,
then there were the regular guys, like the guys that were like really, really political, like Pete Seeger.
I love dude Seeger, man. But also, I mean, he was such a man of the people. Chuck Israel's told me. I mean, growing up in a kind of a communist, pseudo-communist family in Massachusetts, they would he'd be on the porch at 10 years old picking with Pete Seeger. I mean, the man was. I don't know. I'm not trying to be. I wasn't around for that time, and I don't want to be Pollyannish about it because I mean, like you said, I mean, there was David Axelrod, the great producer, talked about his father and the kind of vicious attacks that longshoremen would get against the police. So there was a lot of sort of education towards the rights of the working man. Now, jazz in itself, I'm curious too as a journalist. I know you're just getting hip to my show, but as a journalist, when I go to see live original spiritual music, I don't wait for the musicians to go there. I bring a tribal urgency, sort of like Yankee Stadium, bottom of the ninth, down one, two outs, bases loaded, fanaticism. So you get the musicians out of their thinking mind into the spirit mind. And after that, all bets are off. And I kind of wanted you to talk a little bit about you know, the idea, and the reason I can do this is because I'm not intimidated or I'm not in awe of the musicians because outside of playing some conga drums and jam, I don't consider I'm not a musician. Were you more apt to say, I don't mind squeaking and squawking because I'm surrounded by all these guys. They're so cool, Brecker Brothers, Liebman, and they're almost. I mean, not everybody has an ego, but they were all so sweet were you not intimidated to just pick up the horn and start blowing?
I talked to John and Bobby about this. Um,
Yeah.
and one reason that they started playing with me or allowing me to play with them was that they liked the fact that I would try anything. I wasn't afraid. So
Fearless. Yeah.
if I was nervous, that was only between me and me.
Yeah.
But if I picked up the horn and I was going to do what I could do. Now, am I intimidated? Yeah, of course. You're going to play. Like I sat in with Rudolph Johnson. I don't know if you know who that
Oh,
is, but
stop right there. Stop
yeah,
right there. That man. I interviewed Chester Thompson, the organ player from Tower of Power, and they were in a quartet way back in Oklahoma City. And when they moved to San Francisco, Rudy would just sit in a closet and blow. That dude was a sound yogi, man. He was out.
yeah. Rudolph was.
But that would have been intimidating for me, regardless, to sit in with him.
Well, I mean, he was so warm and open
Yeah.
that he let me sit in and do what I could do, and afterwards, I mean, we talked, and he said, well, you have a good sound, and you need to just tighten up a couple of these things, I mean, but he was also an incredibly, I mean, I was drawn to him because we went to see him because he was an incredibly spiritual man,
Oh my
and
God.
and his well, actually, I always felt sad that he was so under-recognized that he just buried himself in Ray Charles's band. I
Well,
mean,
probably because he was able to sing for his supper that way. He couldn't make. I mean, the albums he made on Black Jazz Records are
yeah,
way spiritual, man. And
yeah,
all
yeah.
those guys, that I mean, that was Golia. You sort of just cut in between. I mean, I think it's beautiful because I remember the skipper Henry Franklin. I'm not sure if you ever played with him before,
I played
but
with him with Bobby Bradford, and he's one of the first cats I I actually played with at his house.
In
Somebody's
Paris, yeah,
organized
the most beautiful. I mean,
session.
Skipper at home. He
Yeah,
he he said
I'll
there
see
was.
him on. I'm going to see him on Tuesday, actually.
Well, you
Not
tell
this
him Jake.
Tuesday, next Tuesday.
Tell him Jake Feinberg gives him a big hug. I haven't talked to him in a minute, but he was one of my earliest supporters. And Henry's just one of those guys that, like, whether it was I can see his face, right? Gene Russell, we did a tribute concert for him, or Rudolph
Mm,
Johnson, or
yeah.
Henry the Skipper Franklin. I mean, that Black Jazz label, I mean, they didn't even have much distribution, but Rudy, I mean, if you listen to his playing, I mean, it would just he was
Hmm.
like a train cat. I mean, it was pretty deep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He was.
But you
I
were
remember.
fearless. You were fearless though, because you didn't really know any better.
Well, that's true. I mean, when I started playing soprano, I was in this. The very first group I was in, they said, we like the soprano, but we hear more flute. Can you play flute? And I
Yeah.
said, I don't know. I'll get one and find out. I mean, I didn't know that there was a big difference.
Right.
So for me, that let me that opened doors that I think other people, other normal sane people would know that you don't play the flute and the saxophone the same way. I had knew it from listening to a record and hearing Eric Dolphy. It's like, oh, his flute playing sounds different from his alto and his bass clarinet. Therefore, the flute should sound like a flute. And I happen to have the great fortune of hanging out a bit with Roland Kirk. So when you see Roland, I, I was really around greatness when I lived in New York, and my skills as a painter, whether good or bad, if you like them or not, doesn't really matter. But it opened doors for me that I could sit with Roland Kirk while my girlfriend was getting a lesson and listen to him do stuff and explain stuff. Then later on, when I played the flute, I had all that information I could pull up. And it was real life information. It wasn't like internet information where you get like one third of it with no depth. It was like a personal guy's experience saying like, yeah, when you do that, you do that, you can get this. It's like, oh, okay, that's what a flute is supposed to sound like. It's not supposed to sound like. It's supposed to sound like a beautiful mellifluous tone. Now Nancy was graced with a beautiful tone. She studied with Ron Paul, and actually, here's a funny story. uh, so Roland says he was Roland then. He wasn't Rasan then. He,
Yeah,
he
sure.
changed Rasan. He changed Rasan just shortly after she stopped taking lessons. But so he says, say, you studied with Ron Paul, right? And Nancy said, yes. I took some summer camps and I did this, and blah blah blah. She said, uh-huh. I heard he got a gold flute, and Nancy said, yeah, he has a 24 karat gold flute. And so Rasan says, shit, man, how much that cost? And Nancy says, oh, now this will blow your mind because this is like 1967 or 68 or something like that. And, no, this must have been 67. So she says, oh, it cost him about $3,000. And Roland says, shit, man, nobody, nobody would make $3,000 worth of sound on a flute. And so, okay, so she didn't say anything, right? So we go back to see him like 2 days later. He's playing at the Village Vanguard. So we go to see, we go to see him. Damn, he had a gold flute.
Unbelievable.
We
Vinny,
bought him a
Vinny,
gold
I mean,
flute.
dude, you're making my year right now. But I have to read you this quote, because I do feel like because of the cats, I mean, because of the fact that you were fearless, and because of the fact that you were definitely playing beyond what you knew, and you were playing over the edge. This was fascinating for me. And again, I want to be clear that Uh, you know, I respect. Listen, there were so many cats that died broke. There were so many
Yeah.
geniuses that died broke, and so it was about making a living. This is from one of my interviews with the drummer Joe Chambers. He
Oh,
said
yeah.
he said the writers and journalists had this term they used called avant-garde. They were talking about quote unquote the free jazz. Stanley Crouch said the free avant-garde music is what we were doing on Blue Note, not Archie Shepp and Albert Eiler. You could hear all the tradition in those Blue Note recordings. We could swing, we could play the blues, and we could run through changes. Those cats, Eiler and Shep, were around doing their thing, but they couldn't play no tunes. They couldn't play no changes. Those cats were playing altissimo, squeaks and squawks. They couldn't get a job at Radio City or backing up a singer. All they could do is what they did. Shep got better, and as of today, he can play changes. Eric Dolphy doesn't belong in that group because Eric was a traditional musician. He knew everything and played in the orchestra. Pharoah Sanders was playing changes way back then. Even when Train started doing the altissimo, they accepted it because they had heard him play before. So I want to go back to this for a minute. It's just somebody's opinion, but this was just fascinating. You know, you talk about mid 60s Blue Note, Bobby Hutcherson, Andrew Hill, Freddie Hubbard. That's what Stanley Crouch considered free avant-garde music because they could swing, they could play the blues, and they could run through changes, and they were adding some new vocabulary. Whereas the cats like Eiler and Shep were squeaking and squawking. Now, the bottom line is that they Chambers and those cats were fighting these guys for gigs. You were right in that milieu. This was before you moved out to LA. And it's your opinion. You can riff any way you wanted it. I just found it interesting.
Well, Stanley's kind of uh, first off, he's kind of a he was kind of a racist, and
Really?
I did not have a really good experience with Stanley. He sat in with Bob. He was kind of a half-assed drummer,
Yeah.
and couldn't really do too much on his instrument. So he may be talking about himself
You're talking about Joe
and
Chambers.
and his application to
Yeah.
to the music.
Sure.
Now, uh,
You said, I'm sorry, you
uh,
said
uh,
Stanley. You meant Joe? Did you mean Joe Chambers or did you mean Stanley?
no, I'm talking about Stanley.
Stanley
No, Joe
Crouch sat in
James.
on
Joe,
drums?
Stanley Crouch played drums.
Yeah. Okay. He sat in with Bobby Bradford one time and couldn't really cut it.
Yeah, I didn't think he played very well, and
Yeah, because Chambers is a good drummer, you know.
I know he's a fantastic drummer. He's also a good a marimba player and vibes player,
Incredible player.
and
Yeah.
and so I'm very familiar with his work, and I would never say anything bad about him. So I don't want to get misconstrued here. I'm
No,
talking
no, of
about
course. You know what I'm curious about? Because you started at Grand Central squeaking and squawking. And what I'm saying is that regardless of Crouch's opinion, I sort of understand it as a 47-year-old cat where it's like it was on a record label. Those guys were playing, they could swing. I mean, you could hear the tradition and you could hear the newness. Whereas
well,
the other cat, yeah,
here's the thing, though.
go
See,
ahead, go ahead.
I started that way, and I was isolated.
Mhm.
When I came to California and I met John and Bob, they were playing at this place called the Little Bighorn, which was a place that Bobby started. This was this is about my third trip back here, I think. With the
Oh,
last one, I, I met them around 1975, or well, I met them originally in 1971. They were
really?
they were they yeah, I met them with Anthony Braxton introduced me to them. I had taken my first road trip from New York out to California, and Anthony and Circle were out here at the same time, and so it was like old home week, because they knew me from New York. So Anthony said it didn't have a car, and I had met somebody, and so we I said, well, I can borrow this car and I can take you wherever you want to go. He said, well, John Carter and Bobby Bradford are playing. Do you know them? And I said, yeah, I have their records and I have the interview they did for Jazz and Pop magazine. I said, I think they're fantastic.
My
Kind of a
God.
space age bebop. So I drove them there and I introduced myself and was introduced by by Braxton. And I was having a painting show in 1972. So this 71, the end of 71, I said, would, when I come back, would you guys play at it? I'm using the paintings as music. I went through the whole thing and they said yes. So, okay, so I'm going to fast forward and not even talk about all the stuff that happened for that because that was amazing. But
Wait,
I'm
hold on.
going to
I want to hear
fast
about
forward.
that. I want to hear about that.
Well, yeah, but it's going to throw off the other part of the story.
Okay,
So
go ahead. Yeah, go
you
ahead.
want to go back to it, I'll go back
Yes,
to it.
fine.
But so again, now in 1975, I'm kind of playing a little bit and thinking about doing that full time, and I've, I'm playing here and there and doing that kind of stuff. I see Bobby's playing at this place called the Apple Pan, which was right in the heart of like studio land, and he was playing with Glenn Ferris and James Newton.
Oh
I don't
my
remember.
God.
I don't
Oh
remember
my
the
God.
vibes player name. I don't remember. Well, I think it was William Jeffrey and a guy named Kim Calkins played bass who passed away rather early. And so to go up to Bob, and he says, "Oh man, how are you? I'm fine." Blah blah blah. He says, "Say, I have a place, and we've been playing every Sunday. You should come by and draw pictures." And I said, like, kind of sheepishly looked at the floor and said, "I'm kind of not really doing that much anymore. I'm just kind of playing." And he went, "Oh, yeah, that's right. You had a saxophone. I remember when I came to your house." I said, "Yeah." I said, "I'm kind of doing that." And he said, "Well, Mr. Golia, why don't you bring your saxophone and we'll see what you can do?" And I said, "Okay." So I started playing with Bob. And now,
Oh my God.
here's the thing about the story, and John, of
Yeah,
course. The thing about the story is like every week they would play, and it wasn't just free. So they would call tunes. So they might call Stellar by Starlight. Okay, do I know Stellar by Starlight at that time? No, I don't. But if I wanted to play the next week, I best know Stellar by Starlight by the time I came back.
I dig.
So they were like, all free stuff is good, but you got to know your basics.
I love it. I
So
freaking love
they
it.
would
Yeah.
call all these tunes in the middle of that, and whether they took them out or not, that was fine. But when your turn came, you better play the tune. And that was it. And I remember they illustrated it by telling this story. Like this one kid who was young, he's not a kid, but a young guy who playing saxophone also when we were there said, "So do we have to learn all these tunes?" And John said, "Bob, you remember when we were in Texas? Mm-hmm. Well, you remember like when we couldn't play a tune, they wouldn't let us play for 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. He said, and if we came back after that 2 weeks, they wouldn't let us play for a month. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember that. And they never answered the kid. They just told that
Yeah,
story.
sure. They
And
were, it was, yeah.
and everybody knew, like, if you don't know that tune next week, you're really screwed, because
Vinny,
they're
though,
not
what
going
I
to.
want you, I think this is so important because what you're really articulating is that, and you could answer this question on your own, but it's like, were Shep and Eiler, just as examples, sick and tired of what the label of a jazz musician was saying, we know how to play the American songbook. We're bored to death of that shit, and we're going to take it out. It wasn't that they couldn't play it, they were just bored of it. Here you go. Here you have Bradford and Carter saying, pay homage to the songs, pay homage to the tunes. But yeah, Miles was bored to death of bebop. I mean, he hated the shit. And so it's like, was it a matter of that they were squeaking and squawking only because they could squeak and squawk, or because they were trying to redefine what a true musician was?
Well, I can't really talk for Albert, and I never would talk for Archie Shepp. He's probably the most articulate cat. He's right up there with when you speak to him, he's right up there with somebody like George Lewis. Like
He's
his
philosophic, yes. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, like when he discusses things, it's really in depth and he can take things apart. And then you can actually hear an interview with him talking about this very subject um,
Hmm.
um, on YouTube. But I mean, I know that Albert played with Little Walter, so he's got a great grasp of the blues. If you're
That's
playing with
right.
Little Walter, and he was allowed solo every once in a while. So he's coming up through the ranks, and all these guys came up through the ranks. And it seemed to me that on occasion they might even call a tune like a tune they like or play a tune they like. I don't mean to speak for them, but it seemed like they were just fine. And Archie, I don't think like in particular. I mean, I was a big fan. I lived down the street from Archie. So, matter of
Wow.
fact, this funny story. When I was a painter, I used to sometimes get off the train early when I was going home and just walk around the village. So one day the street, I think it was Broadway. I don't can't remember, but what street it was, but it was torn up a little, and they were doing some construction. New York is going to be a great city once they finish it. But 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 so I'm walking down the street, and I hear this sound. Now I didn't know Archie lived up the street from me, so I there's a pile of kind of rubble and stuff, and I'm sitting on a culvert. And all this, I've been listening to the sound. I have my eyes closed. I'm listening. He's practicing, but I'm listening to what he's practicing. And I didn't have a saxophone yet. I was just still painting. And he comes out the door and he comes towering over me. All of a sudden, I see him like in front of me. I said, "Whoa, yeah." He says, "You're a musician?" And I said, "No, I'm a painter. I'm a big I'm a big fan of your playing and stuff." And his whole demeanor changed. He went like, "Oh, really? Oh, thank you. Do you want to come upstairs?" I said, "Oh, I just on my way home from work." I said, "I just listened to your practice." I said, "It just sounds amazing." I was always kind of curious to see, like,
Wow.
what you're
Wow.
working on. And he just was talking, and we had a great discussion, and I went on my way, and then he would say hello. I mean, Archie was like a big like I don't know, like one of those guys that I looked up to, and really enjoyed his playing. I saw him play one night. He started playing, I'd say, with his band, I'd say he started playing at maybe 11:30 or something like that. This was a festival for Black Panthers, as like a benefit. And it was a star-studded, McCoy's group played, and the end result
What
was
year?
the
What
roll.
year was this? Like
Oh, this has
69?
to be 60, 68
Yeah.
maybe,
Hmm.
67, 68. Yeah, it was in Brooklyn, and it ended with the Romar Orchestra. But Archie started playing, and then his set ended. So he did a cadenza while the next band set up. And then he didn't get off the stage. So the next band, I think, was McCoy. And he just played with McCoy straight through that.
I
And
love
then
this.
the next band played, and he played with that band. And then there was the Roma Orchestra, and then he played in that thing. He played from 11:30 until, like, I'd say easily 5:30 in the morning,
Oh my.
almost continually. And,
I mean,
and,
Vinny
and
Golia, I got to ask you this question though. Because Klein, I'll send you the the part of the interview to queue up because he talks about this stuff. You let's see here, get this up. Song of Singing, Black is the Color, Bar Phillips, rest in peace, and Dave Holland. Um, were you compensated? or do you still see royalties from those covers, or was that just a thing? Was that a thing where like Dave and Barr were like, "Yeah, man, we'll use that cover," and just sort of your contribution?
Well, I had given a drawing to Dave, the one that he particularly liked, and he used that for the cover. And ECM sent some. I just said, send me some records, and
I
they sent
freaking
some.
love it, dude. I freaking love. Wait, hold on.
And
And you're telling me I need to get this on the record. You can answer the other thing too, but you're buying before you move to the West Coast.
uh
You're buying Bobby Bradford, Henry Franklin, John Carter records on Revelation. You're already getting those records on the East Coast.
oh, the Black Saint ones were the one.
Black
The
Saint, Black Saint, yeah.
black, yeah, the Bob Fields label I bought because those were more readily available.
Ah,
Flying Dutchman.
the Dutch, yeah, the Dutch, yeah.
The Revelation records I couldn't buy until I came to California. I couldn't
Okay.
find them anywhere.
But with like
Those
Joe
were
Henderson, like so with like you would just ask for records in trade
well,
or something.
Dave Holland was playing with Joe. I
Hmm.
was giving I I was with in a financial strait because I was down to almost my last 30 cents,
Yeah.
and I needed to make some money, and I asked Dave if there was anything, maybe I could draw some pictures. He said, call Joe. And he said, okay. Joe said, yeah, come on down. Come to the session with Dave. And I said, thank you so much. So went to the session and I drew pictures. And, you know, I had to be in the room with the musicians to draw. And the Orrin Kipnis, the producer, he didn't want me in there. And Dave stood up for me and said, it's fine. He won't make any noise. We've done it before. So I did the pictures, and then the next day I went to Orrin's office, and the first thing he said was, we're under no obligation to buy any of these. And I
All right,
said, yeah.
man.
I said, I totally get it. He said,
Yeah.
let me see what you got. And I showed him the pictures and he said, huh, these are pretty good. I said, thank you. And he said, I'll take these two. It fits the concept of the record. I said, oh, thank you very much. He said, and I made $100. The Chick
Oh,
Corea
dude, I'm
cover.
freaking loving Golia forever, dude. This is wait. Oh, so you went to Inglewood Cliffs? Is that where the session was, or for that Henderson?
No, Milestones was someplace in New York.
Okay,
Like,
so you were in the studio with those cats cooking while they were cooking. You were cooking.
yeah, it was all one big happy family in that session. Had
Oh my God!
Dave and Ron Carter, Jack DeJohnette,
Hold on,
Joe,
two bass fiddles, or was one somebody playing
two,
electric?
one electric bass, one upright bass.
Holy shit! This is the
Uh,
great Dijonette. My God,
yeah, Jack was on fire.
fire,
Jack was totally on fire.
fire,
I
dude.
I think George Cables was the piano player,
Right? Yeah, yeah.
and a guy with
Was it Pete Yellen?
a very long name. No, he was on it. It was a guitar player with a long name, but it
Oh, I
wasn't
know who
somebody
it was.
I
No, no, he's
remember.
my dear. He's my dear. I just interviewed him twice. He's Swedish cat, George Wadenius.
Maybe, maybe.
In
I
any
don't.
event,
Yeah,
Keep News was like, we're under no obligation, but then he dug a couple because of the conceptual stuff, and then you were able to go buy some bread and milk and eggs, right?
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
and gasoline and stuff. Yeah, and then Barry Altschul got me a job as an animator on a cartoon. So I kind of made some money, and my by that time my girlfriend had enough and wanted to go back to California, so we left for California.
All right. Well,
Uh,
listen. Yeah.
and before that, and uh, Chick and Dave and Barry Altschul had formed a group trio piano trio, and they did their first concert at the Village Vanguard. And the Village Vanguard was a little less open about having me take up space
Yeah.
in their establishment, and not as they weren't as forgiving as Slugs. Slugs kind of welcomed me, except like like the first night that Tony Williams Lifetime played there, that place was packed, and they just said like, Vinny, you can't have more than one table tonight. You can only have
They
one
used to
table.
give you that's so. First of all, like 'cause McLaughlin was like riffing poetry with Larry Young and Tony and Emergency, and they would. I mean, it's so sick that I have to ask you this also. Like the Swami Satchidananda thing. I haven't talked to Felix in a couple of years, but he's a dear friend, and we did a couple interviews about Swami. But then when I interviewed McLaughlin, um, he talked about going to these Sufi dances in Queens, maybe, and Paul Motian was there. I mean, this was the most mystical time, and drugs aside, it was such a beautiful cross collaborative community. I mean, I think because we're going to have to do set two as soon as possible, but as we wrap up set one, I just kind of wanted you to talk about how much community in music has meant to you in your whole career because the farm system here in Tucson, it's not about facility or chops or riffology, it's about love. It's about concepts. And you were there, yeah, okay, you have a bad experience with this person, that Barry Atchell, Rock Alam, Larry Coryell, Rassan Roland Kirk, Joe Hendricks. I mean, this was the most beautiful cross section of humanity. They welcomed you in as a painter, as an artist, vision, and then you wind up going on and connecting with all these beautiful cats in the West Coast. So just talk about the importance of musical community to Vinny Golia through your life.
Well, I mean, saved my life actually, because I was a bit of a I wasn't always a nice guy. So
Thank God you changed.
I,
Well,
uh,
explain how they
I
saved
hope
your life.
so. I
Explain how they
mean,
saved your life.
well, the music was like a lifeline. It's like, hey, you're supposed to be you're, you're supposed to be experiencing and fulfilling your purpose on the planet as a
Sure.
human. And you have an inkling. But look, here's this community of people who are eating macrobiotic food, who are, doing yoga, who are, like really helping one another. See, during that period of time, Free Life Communication was formed. That was like an organization to help the some of the musicians who were just coming up, like Richie Byrack and Liebman and Steve Grossman and Carl Schroeder, the piano player for Sarah Vaughan for
I
many
know who
years,
he is. Yeah.
and Clint Houston, the bassist, and on and on and on. There were about at one time the original grouping was about 15, 17 of the of us, and then of course I was the only artist, which meant I got to do all the flyers, the letterheads,
Ah.
the all that stuff, the posters, and stuff. So they welcomed me, and of course they were not everyone was supportive when I switched over to music. Some wanted to make sure that I was doing the right thing. One cat just told me, "You want to play music, you're going to have to wait another lifetime," you
Hmm.
know, which I was very crestfallen about that, and because this was a dear friend, and I just thought like, well, I think you're wrong, and I'm going to prove you wrong. So this is some of the negative stuff, but some of the positive stuff was like it was uplifting, where so much that I could, work all day, take a little nap, go draw pictures until 3 in the morning, go to sleep, get up and go to work, and
Hmm.
just do those kind of things, and really felt like I was, quite alive and stimulative, and and then it's still the work ethic and a practice ethic that has carried me through, especially when things. Like for example, like when I was out in when I moved to California, and I was playing for a while, some of my close associates in the band said, "Vinny, we think you're too spread out. You're playing too many instruments. Blah blah blah. You're doing this. You're doing that. You should just concentrate on one. Blah 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 blah." So I had met Benny Maupin in New York, and
Uh-huh.
he was like somebody that I could talk to every once in a while. So I called him cold out of the blue and said, "I don't know if you remember me." He said, "Oh yeah, I have your paintings in my studio." And probably those are gone now because he lost everything in a fire.
So did Bobby. Yeah.
Yeah, they're probably all gone. Anyway, Benny spent an hour and a half, 2 hours on the phone with me, telling
Wow.
me stories of what Eric Dolphy had told him, because he had experienced the same thing from different people. Like, why do you want to play alto flute? Why do you want to do that? Why do you want to play bass clarinet?
Bass clarinet. Yeah. Great.
So he's spent a lot of time. So I got some serious community support. John Carter was another guy. Like and Bob. And Horace too. And, they were all supportive in many ways. So they that sense of encouragement made me a better person. They just were gorgeous to me. I can't even
No, I
explain
know.
it.
Though
And,
it's beyond words. It's
and then yeah,
unquantifiable.
and
Um,
Pharaoh was like a Pharaoh came up to me and introduced me to Mingus, and they were both looking at my pictures and so encouraging, so just just really so supportive, really beautiful humans. Mingus
hey,
always said hello after that. I mean, always was very nice. I had nice discussions with him.
Vinny, can we
But
do set two same time tomorrow
tomorrow I play with people from Scotland in the morning,
in the
but
morning?
yeah, from 10:30 until
You want to do the
12.
afternoon or something?
Then I have a woman coming to take a lesson.
Okay.
So maybe the day after.
You want to do Wednesday at 10 a.m.?
Let me check the calendar
Yeah.
before I open my mouth and just take a look here. Calendar 10 a.m. Wednesday. Uh, I have a gig in the nighttime, but if you're gonna do like another hour or so.
Yeah, we haven't even touched the West Coast yet.
Oh yeah,
Nine wins. We have
sure.
9 wins.
We can do 10 o'clock if you
Great.
want again. Okay.
We'll do it again, man. I had a ball, man. Thank you for making my day. I really appreciate it, man.
Oh, great, man. My pleasure.
Yeah, we'll
Anytime.
do. See you soon, man.
Alrighty.
All right,
Bye bye.
peace. Bye.